All right, so it seems we are live and we have 20 participants already. Probably we will have more joining on later. So as people roll in, I would like to inform you that this event will be recorded and we will have it as well posted on YouTube later. So thank you very much for joining today. I'm super excited to welcome you to the second Zurich Product Management Night Goes Lunch because of the COVID visual panel. My name is Julian Falco. I am an ambassador of the PMF, or the Product Management Festival, and I will be your host today for this virtual lunch. I am joined here by Anna Pernocilla, who is also a member of the Product Management organization, and she has been very valuable in preparing this event today. She will also help me groom the questions that you may post on our different social channels today. One warning though for all attendees, we're using today for the first time the seminar version of Zoom. It's a bit different than normal Zoom, and that's why you can't share your video. You may have seen that already, so it's a bit different than the Zoom you are accustomed to. The added benefits for us are the moderation, so we can better manage the questions that you have. And if you have a question, you can also raise your hand, and then we will let you in so that you can ask the question directly. You can therefore safely and privately enjoy your Pokeball, sushi, or whatever you fancy while enjoying today's live stream. So just trying to share the slide. All right, so for today's panel, we have two awesome product managers coming from Zurich. But before, I'd like to share a few words about Product Management Festival. And then the first talk will be from Flurin Müller, who is the head of product at Locatee. And he will share with us a talk about scaling up B2B enterprise products. And for the second part of our panel today, we will have Ask Me Anything session with Pascal, who is a product manager at Tutti. So before we get started, some background about Product Management Nights. This is an organization or like an event, a meetup event that is working together with the Product Management Festival. The Product Management Festival, as you may also know from the other name PMF, the short name, is about 8 years old. It was founded 8 years ago and is dedicated to the global support and development of product managers in all industries, and strive to amplify the impact of product management with the goal of helping product managers in being more successful and influential, adding real value in their organizations. So since the organization was founded 8 years ago, a lot of other products or events have been added to the portfolio, as you can see on the slide here. One thing on one product that they deliver is the PM survey, or the benchmark about product management and product managers globally. It's free to download. And if you unlock your phone now and get a camera ready, I will have the QR code on the next slide, so then you can take a picture and get directly to the link. The next thing they have are the main events, the conferences. You may have attended the one in Zurich last year. We have one in Singapore as well. Then there are some exec circles, which are events that are for C-level product executives, and this is invite only. The PM nights or the PM lunch during the COVID, like we have today. And lastly, the one in the middle is a course for product executives that is held at INSEAD, so either in Paris, Singapore, or San Francisco, and that's a course that lasts a week that is very focused on product management in general. So if you have your phone ready now, feel free to take a picture of the QR code to download the latest trend and benchmark report from the PMF. A lot of valuable information about different topics such as the PM's salaries and so on. Quite interesting. All right, so now onto the main part. So before we kick off with Flurin, I'd like to quickly introduce Pascal Lumens, so that you get a chance to ask you questions in Zoom, because we will have a lot of questions for her, hopefully for the Ask Me Anything session. I mentioned that before. Pascal joined 2T, but she actually joined very recently. She joined during the lockdown last April. So that's also something you can ask questions about. How is it to start working for a company completely remotely? Last year, she received the Woman in Product Award from the PMF. That's actually not the only award she received. At her last stint at Aduno, she was managing the redesign of the Visica One products from Aduno. She was working there as first a product owner, then a product manager. And the Visica One, which is a digital service for credit cards, won several awards in UX, in design, functionality, business impacts, and lean agile. So we're having the honor of asking her questions today. Feel free to write your questions in Zoom. So you have, with the functionality of the webinar, you have the option to write your questions. We will then room through the questions and run through them in the second part of this talk. All right, so about the main talk or the first talk today, we have Flurin Müller, the head of product at Locatee. Flurin Müller, he's an entrepreneur and early stage investor from Zurich. He started his career as a freelance UI designer. He has been working for several customers in Europe and in the US before founding his own company, BuddyBroker, a B2B HR tech startup that was then acquired by XING. After a time at XING, Flurin joined Locatee, where he's now heading the products. Flurin is passionate about startups, as you may see from his profile. And next to his job, he still advises startups and also invests in some of them. I think his experience as entrepreneur and successful entrepreneur in the sense that he sold his company is also super valuable for understanding how to scale a B2B business, which is the topic for today. So I'm super stoked to have Flurin today. Flurin, welcome.
Thank you very much. You hear me?
Yes, we can
Perfect.
hear you very well.
Good, great.
Yeah, so please feel free to take over the stage.
Great. So I will just share my screen quickly, and then you should actually. All good? Perfect. So yeah, I'm really happy to have the chance today to talk to you about scaling up B2B enterprise products based on my learnings here at Locatee. And before I start, just as a quick overview, what I want to walk you through. So first, I just want to give you some kind of overview what we do here at Locatee, so you can better associate my inputs with the actual business model behind. Then I want to show you the dimension of scaling we see, how we measure scalability at Locatee, and yeah, just a summary. And then if there's some questions, also have the chance to answer them. So before I start, I just want to mention three quick things. So there is really, I don't have want to claim completion of the topic scalability. So the goal is really just to have the chance to share with you my experience. It doesn't mean that there are not other things around when it comes to scalability. Then it's not a technical playbook, so it doesn't have a technical focus today. It's more about the processes and the challenges behind scaling up from a product perspective. And last but not least, I mean, we're really in the middle of scaling, so there are plenty of challenges around. We are having tons of problems to solve. So this is basically just a sneak peek from the current moment we are in, or the current situation we're in. But first, let's talk about Locatee, what we do. So I'm not sure if you know that around business, office buildings are only utilized around 60% in average. So it means a lot of office space is not used at all. So quite inefficient use of office buildings across the globe. Besides that, also when you see what's going on currently due to COVID, so a lot of just the work habits change. People work from home, are more flexible. People don't really have fixed desks anymore. This actually enables a big saving potential when it comes to real estate. But the big issue here is that companies often don't really have the transparency to act upon it and optimize it. Second, office buildings don't really serve the needs of their employees, meaning, well, there is often not the space provided by companies which employees actually need. Talking about meeting rooms, if there are enough meeting rooms, sometimes they're not easy to find, at least the free ones. If you want to find free desks, finding colleagues in the office buildings, these can all be challenges which impact the satisfaction of employees. And I also must say we are addressing enterprise customers. So I'm not talking about an office building with 50 employees. I'm talking about buildings with 500,000 employees. So this is kind of the dimension we are addressing. So what we do at Locatee, so we measure actually office utilization in short. So we are kind of the Google Analytics for office buildings. We do that by measuring existing data sources such as Wi-Fi, LAN, or sensor measurements, and actually provide all these data and turn them into meaningful insights on our analytics platform. And based on these data, companies can actually optimize their real estate, optimize the efficiency of their real estate footprint, so make it smaller, plus also provide an office space where people actually like to work, which actually serves their needs. When we look at it on a higher purpose, so our vision is actually that we want to enable a place where people love to work. So this is kind of our motivation why we actually do this whole thing. So it's not just to shrink down the office space, it's really to turn the workplace into a place where people really like to come. And I thought it maybe helps you to just walk you through our just high level on our journey, how we want to reach that or turn that vision into life. So first, we kind of collect the data, helped with this data. We want to enable companies to make fact-based decisions and thereby reduce their real estate cost. So this is kind of the green part, the analytical part. And then we want that companies can use these saved costs to actually invest them into improving the quality of the workplace and provide the space the employees actually need. And this actually then leads to more satisfied employees actually. And then we also differentiated between like providing this value to a single customer, or also in the future plan to use this data for benchmarking, to give companies guidelines, what other companies do, to what kind of workplaces they provide. So to also have this benchmarking with industry peers. Yeah, so this is in short what we do. When you look at Locatee today, we are a Zurich-based company, one office location so far, 35 employees. We just closed the Series A at the beginning of the year, and we were founded 2015, not by me, but yeah, two co-founders basically. And today we serve various customers across 6 continents in more than 50 countries. So yeah, it's kind of not a regional business, it's kind of serving customers globally. So yeah, so much about Locatee. Now, when we talk about, or when I talk about scalability, so what I mean is I see kind of 4 different dimensions of scalability. So on one hand, we have kind of the customer benefits, which means are the use cases we actually provide as a company, as a product, are they really meant for a bigger audience, or are they kind of niche? Then the second thing is, well, is kind of the car engine. Does it scale? Does it scale performance-wise, from the data processing-wise? Does this hold bigger load? Then are our processes also meant to scale, or are they just working for small scale? And in the end, there is also like the whole sales part, which I don't really want to talk about. It's not my expertise, and it should not be the focus of today, but there are also plenty of topics to cover there for sure. So at Locatee, we tried to kind of come up with a nice like a storyline for the whole company, what we mean with scaling. And we came up with this analogy of like the size of a city, which reflects quite well what we do, because we measure buildings, office buildings. So we came up with these milestones of the size of the city, which we then broke down in village, town, city, metropolis, which are actually also the internal milestones we communicate. And then we take the scalability dimensions and actually just, this is super high level, so there are more low level descriptions about it, but we just want to guide with the team internally what is actually our understanding of this growth of the scale targets. And that's actually what we do with these 4 steps. So we kind of just say how we want to evolve the product, the company, across these different milestones and scale up. Yeah, so this is kind of what we use internally. Then now what I would like to do is I would just now dive into, because I think this is kind of the most interesting things, is just like really pick certain examples from each of the different dimensions and talk you through some learnings or some things we went through which worked better and some not that good. So you can maybe benefit from the one or the other experience. So when we come to customer benefits, and this is kind of the product behind, more like the UX, the whole user, the visible part of the product. So here, like 3 things I felt like are kind of just interesting to look at and just keep in mind, of the back of your mind. One is actually, yeah, just there is always this trap of, especially with B2B and especially with enterprise B2B, that you kind of build custom products. So you have the first big, or the first 2 big customers, they have special requirements, and you are not yet in this market or in this position to deny things. So you tend to build as a company things which are kind of unique for a certain customer. And this is per se not really, I mean, these things happen. They happened to both companies I was involved in so far, as a product or head of product. But I think it's important to identify them and get rid of them at some point, as they are just really expensive to maintain. What we did is we kind of built the data input API where customers can actually build against our product, and not that we have to build kind of the customizations on our hand. So this is something we introduced lately. Then another thing which also helped us quite a bit, I mean, we used to be the jack of all trades. We tried to be everything and cover all the use cases, and we were kind of really addressing the visionary buyers, and we thought it helps us to just show off by showing we can cover as many use cases as they're out there. By that, we also claim to be like the smart building platform, but we just felt like this really didn't help us to address a bigger market audience of pragmatist buyers. So we shrunk down our value proposition to become kind of the workplace analytics platform, which covers less use cases. So it's easier to explain what we do and better do these things right. And then let partners cover other use cases. I think this is something which works quite well. And then the last point, remain lean, meaning, I mean, as customers grow, as the customer size grow, there is a lot of requirement for additional enterprise features, additional complexity. I think it's just good to always challenge if this is really needed. And we kind of have the tendency to really go as long as possible with a really like a workaround-ish approach for things which are not really like key of the user experience. So we work a lot, we use a lot of our own API to maintain the platform in the background, instead of building features, user interfaces for that. When we then move to the technical foundation, so here, as I said, it's less about the architecture details, how we build a multi-tenant cloud platform, or so. I'm not the right person to give inputs on that, but more like what helped us is that we kind of know our scale. So when you scale, you probably don't want to, optimize for hypothetical cases which are not relevant in the next couple of months or years. So that's why we came up with these stages, and we knew, okay, in the next step, we need to be able to roll out that many buildings for that many customers, and then just optimize for that scale and not for bigger ones, so that you just don't waste your resources. And one thing which was probably a little bit unique to our case is we started on-prem. So we had an on-prem solution because we are basically acting behind the firewall of the company, because we collect kind of sensitive data. So it was easier to access the market as an on-prem solution. But this almost broke our neck because it's just so hard to maintain on-prem solutions for a fast growing and fast iterating startup, because until you can ship innovation, it just took forever with approval processes from the customer side and so on. So now we finally moved to the cloud, and now we can ship basically innovation, fixes, patches, releases with one click. But I think it's just so important to iterate fast and thereby be closer to the customer, and also close this customer value loop. So when customers give you feedback, that you can somehow improve something on the product in a reasonable amount of time, and not before they already forgot they ever told you that. So I think this is kind of nice. And the last thing is that you should own the user experience. Also here, I mean, for us, as it's also more like related to this on-prem part. I think it's just with this on-prem solution, it was completely a black box how the customers actually experience our product, because we didn't know. We didn't have any metrics, and it was just super uncomfortable because we are always one step too late. So when something broke or so, we just didn't know before the angry customers told us. And now with this cloud, with the money we are monitoring, we are able to access what they see, and I think this helps a lot. And then last but not least, about operational excellence. So, I mean, in the early days, I think you kind of have the mindset to just do everything possible in your capabilities to make a customer happy. And I think this is good like it is, but you also have to challenge this approach on, does this work also on scale? Because at some point you have to standardize things. And I think you just need to find out for you what processes you need to have in place to turn a customer into an engaged customer without having this, super personal, take him by the hand approach. Because I think for most products, this won't work on scale. So I think it's good to also invest in a scalable onboarding, in scalable trainings, make sure they are standardized processes. You can onboard new people to explain it, and not just have a really, random approach on that. And the second point is keep customers happy, but not at customers at any cost. I think I heard that from a lot of friends who are also having like B2B businesses, and they're always like these customers who cause like 80% of the effort, but maybe only provide 20 or only contribute only a small part to the overall revenue, or are not that strategically valuable. And I mean, I know it's hard to say, okay, let's let go a customer, because somehow as an entrepreneur, you fight for every customer somehow. And it's hard to, but at some point it's just, sometimes the customer can just be too expensive to maintain because there are so many special wishes and you cannot do it right anyway. So at some point you also have to just cut the ropes and say, okay, this is not for us. This is not how, it doesn't match with the product strategy anymore. We do also kind of segmentations by priority. So we know internally also if we maybe can go the next extra mile with the customer or not. So we create buckets of customers, which help us as an internal kind of navigate and align internally. And and the last thing, don't want to mention too much about that, is just, I think it helps to know how expensive your operations are. So, what is the cost of all your interactions with the customer, from customer success, from operations, from what else exists in your company, because there are a lot of like hidden costs, and I think you at some point when you scale want to know what are actually scaling. Because if you scale inefficiency and really heavy processes, this will not be that fun from a margin perspective. Good. For a last slide, I want to quickly dive into some scalability measures. These are just two of them we use, but I think they're kind of interesting to look at, because on the left side, you see we have this technical scalability, which is kind of what a lot of people understand about scalability, is just make sure your engine also allows to operate for more customers, more users, higher data load. And we measure that by kind of how many square meters of building space can be processed with one Locatee instance. We don't have a multi-tenant cloud, so we have single tenant. We have different cloud instances for a customer. Even though, so for us, it's just important to know how much workload, how much data processing of square meters can we handle with one instance. And here you see, we also have these milestones based on the customer size we need to serve. They're also kind of aligned with these objectives. We just always optimize for the next bigger thing. And actually the dotted line is the next goal we have based on the already signed contract values and the upcoming rollouts. They're not yet rolled out, but they're kind of already signed square meters we need to be able to operate. So this is what the next goal will be aimed for. And then on the right side, you actually see kind of the operational scalability. So it means how many employees does it take from our side to actually to provide service for these square meters. And what you see here is we haven't really been focusing much, or we didn't really improve a lot in the last quarters on become more efficient. So as the customer base scaled and grew, we also hired more people. So we grew from like, in this time period, we grew from like 8 people to like 34. So of course we got more people, we got more customer, but we didn't become more efficient. And just lately we started to really focus in make the operation processes more efficient. And that's what you see. So it's also with the upcoming rollouts where we already take into consideration the new headcount. I think we should really improve on this metric. Yeah, and then as last slide, just to sum up, so watch out for this building trap. Don't go into the customization. Don't go too much down the customization road. For me, it's also kind of a little bit the fake of the product market fit. So it doesn't really tell you much about the product market fit if you go too heavy on customization, because then you're kind of a project company kind of. Yeah, focus on what you're good at. Know your scale. The thing I mentioned before, be able to like innovate fast, be able to ship innovation fast. So you're really close to the customer. You can really act on feedback. And maybe as the last thing is really know what it takes to make a customer happy, roll it out on scale. Yeah, and these would be my 5 cents on scaling up B2B enterprise products.
Really cool. Thank you very much, Flurin. Very, very insightful. It's always amazing to see how different it is to be in the startup phase as opposed to the scale-up phase. Because in the startup phase, you tend to do things that don't scale, but then you have to identify the moment when is the right time to actually start doing things that scale. And I think you've really nailed it with your presentation, with a lot of insightful ideas how to do that the right way. Maybe there are a few questions, by the way. I'd just like to start with one question to summarize the whole thing. If you had to go back in time 2 years, what would you tell yourself about how to scale, or what not to do, or what to do actually with Locatee?
So I mean, throughout the journey, I think there are tons of things, small things you think, I would have done this differently, or stuff like that. And I think they always happen, and it's really hard to prevent them. But I think for us, the main thing, which was really costly and really painful, is that we started so late with this cloud move. Because moving the product to the cloud, I think for us, this has by far the biggest impact at all in terms of how close we are to the customer, how fast we can iterate, how much more convenient it is to really know what's going on at the customer. And it just took us, moving to the cloud is not only a technical challenge, it's also a legal challenge, especially when you handle with enterprise customers. So when you do such a thing, I think it just took us like forever to negotiate these new contracts, because you dive into data privacy issues and so on. So I think it's the fact that we didn't start with the cloud move way earlier, because it just takes time and it just makes the life so much easier in terms of scaling, just talking about scaling now.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Duly noted. We have a question here about innovation. Where do you get your innovation from, and how do you incorporate them in short term to your backlog?
So, I mean, what we do is we kind of, I'm not sure if you know the product, the tool Product Board. So this is kind of an ideation tool where really basically all the frontline employees, including sales and so on, just write down all product ideas which came up in customer conversation. So we kind of keep track quite well on what's coming in from the customer side. So this is kind of one part of the innovation. And then we also really try to involve employees into the whole product discovery process by also involving them in the, in the solution finding. But in the end, it's kind of this mix. I think it's a mix of listening to the customer, but also somehow, as we are kind of pioneering a space, it's also that a lot of things are not really out there. So you kind of have to come up with a couple of ideas how to solve a problem by yourself before the customer has any opinion about it, because they're in a lot of ways not that far. They don't really know what is possible, kind of. So I think it's this mix between listening to the customer, understand what's already there, but also come up with a fair amount of own ideas to solve a problem, and then bring it together. And I think that's pretty much that. And we try to, when we work on items, we try to really collect as much feedback from customer about current implementation, so we can kind of cluster all the things together.
Cool, thank you. Another question about leadership, maybe a little bit related to the previous question. Which skills are most useful when leading a PM role and to successfully scaling a product?
So, I mean, on one hand, I think it's good to have a fair amount, especially for a tech company. I think it just never hurts to have a fair amount of technical understanding and know at least what's going on, in all these technical scalability discussions. Even though it's not like you don't really need to be the person who decides on what is really best for tech scalability. What for me really helps is, that you have that you're able to develop this really holistic understanding of the product. So when you scale the product, what are all the affected stakeholders, teams? So I think you just need somehow, it's hard to narrow down that into a specific skill, but I think empathy is just a really good thing, that you really understand, okay, what causes, how does scaling affect operations? Let's say in our case, when they need to set up 1,000 buildings in 1 month. So what are all the processes they have to go through, and what are their headaches? So I think it's just identifying all these different. So when you think about you scale up your main metric, like your main item of scale, which is buildings in our case, kind of be able to identify all these affected corners in the company, and then kind of bring all these things together. So communication, empathy, I think these are all, and creativity, of course, as well, because I think it just helps if you can also come up with creative solutions.
Yeah. I think these are important keywords, and being a product manager in the end is a lot about communicating and sharing with other people. So empathy is definitely a strong component of that. We have a last question from Oliver. It's about the setup that you have. If you have, I will read the question. Do you assign different use cases to work onto different teams, or is the whole team involved working on one case per sprint? If the first, how do you align the different results between the different teams?
So what we have is, because we have kind of two completely separate parts of our product. We have kind of a whole, basically the bottom of the iceberg, which is this whole data processing engine. So we do a lot of data processing, and really like basically a whole world without any user interface, user interaction. So we kind of pack all these things in one team, because they kind of require a completely different set of skills than the whole UX, UI related features. And then we have kind of currently a team which handles all the user use cases in terms of user interaction. One thing which we currently struggle a bit, this is kind of one of the current challenges, is that we build a lot. Because our customers grow quite fast in size, there is a big demand for make the product technically more scalable, build enterprise features. So in general, if enterprise customers grow in size, they demand just things like, you know, proper access management, single sign-on, like just enterprise features which are not really core to what you do. And I think we currently struggle a bit to that these kind of requirements suck up all the resources, and we have not really, we struggle to also maintain our focus on the analytics part, because they kind of come always second. So first, we kind of need to make sure that we can roll out a customer, and second, we need to provide them with meaningful analytics. And as the customer size grow quite fast, we always focused first on, you know, scaling enterprise features, and analytics is always second. And I think now we just think about also putting a dedicated team on analytics to make sure at whatever happens, we always have certain resources on our core USP topic we want to be good at in the future.
Yeah, cool, thank you. We have a last question. I think that's the very last one. Then we have to move on to Pascal. Can you read it, or should I read it loud? I think you have access to the platform. I will read it actually for the other participants.
Okay.
Say you are growing rapidly from a startup phase. When and how do you make the shift to scale it without causing much disruption to business as usual tasks, especially if it requires transformation from technical, operational, and people's perspective?
So, so I think, well, first, I feel like it's barely impossible to avoid this distraction from business as usual tasks. So I think it's just especially if you grow fast and things. I mean, this is kind of you always say when you scale and when you grow, this is kind of a good problem to have, but it can really also be a problem, and it's not. I think it's it can also cause headaches. So I think you kind of have to live with it, that it's stressful and it's chaotic, especially when things go well. Nevertheless, I think what really helped us to somehow still get more, more calmness and quietness into the teams is just really be really strict with the focus, like really make sure that we also define what we don't touch right now. Don't open more construction sites than needed, even though if you think it's just a nice thing you can do on the side. I feel like with this, we had to go through really painful learnings. But I think I would just start to really challenge every single piece of additional topic you open up, because I think this also fills brain capacity and stresses you out in some way or the other. And I think focus for me would be definition of roles, kind of.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's the main takeaway that we also had through your presentation. When you talk about customer benefits, technical foundation, and operational excellence, you have to stay focused, and that's how you then successfully are able to scale the company. So thanks a lot, Flurin. I think it was super insightful. Thanks a lot from Product Management Festival. I hope we can meet in person once. To give you a hug, to thank you. In the meantime, please feel free to stay in the chat now, and maybe ask some questions or help Pascal answer some question.
Yeah, I will.
So thank you. Then second up today, Pascal, last but not least, definitely. As I mentioned before, Pascal, who is from the Netherlands originally, she has lived in several countries and she's fluent in 6 languages. Has been quite successful so far in her career. She started her career at Deloitte before moving on to being a product owner and then a product manager at Aduno, where she built or redesigned the Visica One app. She recently joined Tutti, and if I go through the list of awards that the product won, one was from the Digital Economy Awards, where the app or the product got 2 times gold for highest digital quality in user experience, lean and agile and Scrum. And from the Best of Swiss Awards, they won the silver in the category design and bronze in category functionality and business impact. So quite impressive. And maybe Pascal, if you're happy with that, we can kick off by actually talking about these awards.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for the nice introduction.
Yeah, you're welcome. So the first question that I have is, why you were part of a team behind the success of one of the best Swiss apps. What is your biggest takeaway from this success story?
Well, the biggest takeaway is that the success definitely came from listening to our users. So we had, like for many years, I would say, before we started with the redesign and the redesign of some of our features, actually, many comments on that. We're looking at benchmarks, and I would say the success story really is just about listening to what your users need and kind of work on that. Obviously, knowing your users well is quite important in order to do so, but that definitely is it. And then just having a highly motivated team working in the same direction, having a clear goal, I would say that is my biggest takeaway.
Okay. And when you talk about listening to your users, what methods do you use to get access to user feedback?
Yeah, we did a lot, like from like the general things is obviously like the place for comments, etc. But we had many on-site interviews. Then we had surveys, like the whole spectrum. And then obviously, like when working on solutions, testing those extensively, both like internally with our own teams, but also externally working together with agencies that specialize in that. I would say really set us up for success in terms of how to redesign and the redesign of some of our functionalities actually turned out.
Mm-hmm. Did you do that on a regular basis, like sprint by sprint, always like collecting feedback, or did you have like a phase where you had more collection of feedback and then you implemented against
Yeah, so it was actually more of the latter. So we had a phase in which we were extensively working on this because we knew we would do the redesign. The thing is that we had very much a dependency on some of our banks. So for those who don't know, Viseka actually works together with some of the main banks in Switzerland, and we kind of had a timeline there, as you know, the dependencies usually cause. So this meant that when we went live, we really had to go live, and we obviously did some iterations before that, but we had to be pretty sure that the solution was working. So we definitely had this discovery phase with multiple iterations and testing of prototypes, not so much of actually after, like when we actually went live. Obviously, we did iterations as well afterwards, but the heavy part of it was definitely before.
Okay, cool. By the way, for the audience, I'm now reading the questions that we collected before the event today, but feel free to ask questions here in the Q&A as well in Zoom. Otherwise, we are at the risk of running out of question. But there are quite a few left. So one is about the distinction between PO and PM, because you moved on from PO to PM at Aduno. Why did you decide to change? Or how did that change happen?
The change happened progressively, I would say. I started out as a PO, and there was not really a PM function at that time in the company. And I noticed that this was very much lacking. So the more visionary aspect also of the product, where we want to take it. The product was definitely big, a lot of people working on it, and it was just missing. For a while, I had kind of both hats on. This was, I would say, very, very difficult. Definitely, like for the reasons being is that both are a full-time job, and after like really finding out that this is something we want to focus on, more of the visionary aspect of it, we actually then opted to have another PO, and that's how I kind of made the shift. But it definitely went gradually, and I would say it also happened as product within Viseka grew or matured in a way.
Mm-hmm. And what were the challenges of having a double role?
The challenge was to be honest, personally, that I felt I couldn't do both right. It's literally a full-time job to do both. When you're working with the team directly and with your hat as a PO, you feel that you're slacking in the rest. And when you're more working on like the visionary part of it, market analysis, also more with external stakeholders, I just felt that the team needed someone to be closer to them, and this was the turning point where we said, okay, we definitely have to split these roles. It's just not manageable. Also from a time perspective, there are only so many hours in a day, so I would say this is what kind of triggered that.
Okay, cool. So we have some questions coming in. You can read through them, or I can ask or read them. There is one that is actually related to the PM role, so that's the second.
Yeah, let's kick off with that one. Okay, so aside from industry and business knowledge, did you need as a PM any kind of tech skills such as coding to succeed in the role? So this is a really, really good question because most PMs actually do have a technical background, and it is also advisable to have it. However, I am someone who does not have a technical background. Also at Deloitte, this was not part of my job. And I have basically learned on the job. I would say that comparing myself to other PMs, probably I stop the discussion on a technical level sooner maybe than other PMs do. I think this has benefits and like advantages and disadvantages. Advantage being that you really give a lot of freedom to the technical people in your team, and you're really letting them take responsibility. However, obviously you need to be able to discuss on, I would say, like a high level how the solution should work and the impact it has on the product, especially from a user perspective kind of way. So I would say like probably, yeah, it would be beneficial, but I cannot code. I do not code. And I think I'm doing okay. It is something that you will learn on the job. And when you transit to a different company, obviously you have to like think your way into the architecture that they have. I would say like just don't shy away from it. If you do not have this this knowledge right now, you will build it. And obviously just some interest in it does help. But you do not need to be a coder, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to?
This is a fun one. What advice would you have for international PMs trying to break into the Swiss job market? I would say learn German. Depending obviously on which company you're going to start in. Startups usually have, at least in the experience that I have, much more international employees working for them. So there I would say probably you do not need it as much. If you're looking to work in a maybe more established company or bigger company or traditional company in the Swiss market, language is quite important. Besides that, like if you're applying for a job in English, there is, I would say, no special advice. Yeah, just the language, I suppose, would help. Okay. Can you describe how your product team looks like in regards to size, skills, and roles? So now it's very much different. So as mentioned before I was working at Viseka, now I'm working at Tutti. They're very, very different setups. So I would say maybe I can focus on how it was at Viseka there. The size was, I say, we were around, I think around 30 people, but we were distributed in 3 locations, 2 of them being international. So one team in Skopje, one team in Bedano, which is in Ticino, and then here in Zurich. And from skills and roles, I would say we've had, when we were set up with a PO and PM, we actually had also obviously people working on architectural side. We had designers that were part of the team. We had UX researchers that would be part of the teams. And then obviously front end, back end collaborating together. Now at Tutti, it is a bit different. They do not follow SAFe or Scrum. They work with ShapeUp, which means that they are, they have very much a different way of working. And there we are, depending on the team, I would say around 10 per team, 3 teams, 3 PMs. Yeah, designers being not part of the team. So very much different depending on the company you're looking at.
So you only mentioned PMs at Tutti, right? So
yeah,
you don't have POs.
Exactly. Yeah, so this is also one of the challenges that I'm currently facing there. It's very different from how I worked at Viseka, where it was a very typical way of having at the end the PM, the PO, and obviously the teams. And here at Tutti, it's different in the way that there are actually no POs, which kind of forces you again into this double mode. However, we're really trying to have the teams work autonomously. And we work according to ShapeUp, where there are actually no POs, and it is really led by the teams. It's a very interesting challenge, and so far working really well. But yes, at Tutti, we do not have POs. We only have PMs, and it's definitely a learning road.
Mm-hmm. So there was a question about the challenges at Tutti. I think you mentioned that one. Would you like to add a few words about that? About what other challenges you have?
Yeah, so there are many challenges at Tutti, of course, also for the fact that I started during the lockdown. I don't know if any of you actually changed job during this period, but it is very much different when you normally work very close together with teams and you only know each other virtually, especially as I feel that the relationship is then very much work focused. Normally you also have a very much of a personal relationship with people, and that's something that takes a bit more time, I would say, when you start virtually. Why is this important? It is important because of the way people interact when there are issues, or when you know, when not everyone is on the same page. It's much more difficult to read. I would say also because you don't know the people so well. So I would say that is definitely one of the challenges, but I'm surprised at how well it's going. I think everyone has adjusted pretty much to that. And otherwise, yeah, the second challenge I would say is that the company is very much in a transitional phase where we are shifting towards this new setup, which is called Shape Up. Yeah, actually the teams are taking much more responsibility than they did before. PMs are actually backing off. So they were before POs, they are now backing up into the PM role. And I think this is a transition that we're in the middle of, and it's definitely challenging, but also worth it. We're shipping much more than we did before. And so far it seems people are also happy with how it's turning out.
Mm-hmm. Cool. There are two questions about roadmap planning. I don't know if you can answer that for both companies, or you want to two answers. It's about like how many months in advance, how
do you prioritize them? Oh, this is very interesting. I like this question because it's very different depending on the company I was in. So at Vizeka, where we were working in a more traditional setup, and we were working with many external stakeholders, as I mentioned, the other banks. We definitely had a roadmap that was longer than I have at Tutti now. So there we had to announce features or functionalities that we would be working on in the future, really up until I would say a year. However, we always put a very, very big disclaimer saying that this is obviously part of the vision, and we're not putting any months or exact dates for go live. So that was definitely more of like the traditional side, and how we prioritize them was with latest shortest job first. So basically, we had obviously a lot of very fun ideas, and we checked what is the user value, what is the business value, time criticality, how urgent is it, what happens if we do not do this now and we do another feature first, do we get a fine, will something break down, etc. And obviously taking into consideration how long it would actually take to ship this to the market. So that was very much based on the framework from Weighted Shortest Job First, with which we had a lot of good experiences. At Tutti, this is very much different. So here I would say I have a roadmap that is a couple of months long. I think up until probably January, I have a pretty good idea of what we will be working on, what is most important right now, based on very much the product strategy that we have that is currently being worked on, and also, what is important to our users, and not as much also based on external stakeholders. That is very, very different. But we are not working currently with any type of framework as I did before. So that is definitely different.
Okay, insightful. You have in both companies had several teams, and now we're talking about the strategy. So how do you align the strategy across all teams? How do you do that in the old company, and how is Tutti doing that?
Yeah, what I liked very much at Vizeka is that we had these, I would say from the strategy, we had basically a product vision. and from which we also derived our roadmap, our vision, etc. And this is something that we just communicated continuously. So every time we would focus on where do we want to go, like what are the next milestones, what are we working on, and communicating that over and over and over again, I think was probably the beneficial thing to do. On Tutti, we're currently working on that. So the product strategy and also product vision is changing a lot. And I would say very exciting times for us and to be a part of that. And this will be then also obviously communicated once it is more clear how the direction of the company will change.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So we have 2 more minutes. I would say out of the 3 questions, you can pick the one that you like the best. So we have one about how do you use hypothesis for validating roadmap? Do you do yourself lo-fi prototyping or conceptual documentation? And if yes, how? And which PM certification do you recommend to do?
Okay.
Big one.
Yeah, big one, because they're quite different. Like let's just start at the top, the PM certifications. So here I would say, I think that it makes more sense to see what you would actually need within your company. And especially as you say, do they offer any value at all? I would say yes, they do offer value, depending also on the type of company. So if you're working in a company where a product in general is still in an early phase and it still has to mature within your company, like getting that kind of knowledge or getting certifications would definitely help. I would say to kind of transition that. And also for the job market, I think there are definitely things to be gained from this. Personally, I actually like to look at the different certifications in the kind of concept that we were working with. So when I was very much working with Scrum, I had Scrum certifications. When we were changing towards SAFe, I had certifications from SAFe. And I think that brings the most value because you really much more understand your role within the context that you're working in. So I would say, just to answer that briefly, have a look at the way you're working or the direction that your company is going into, and then get those certifications. If you're planning on changing jobs, get certifications. It definitely doesn't hurt. If you're working more for startups, I think this might be less relevant. I think the experience that you have probably will be speaking for itself, which obviously it always does. So I think those are my thoughts on that.
Okay, super, really cool. I just have a logistic question because we're running out of time. Anna, should we extend for the few questions that remain, or is it?
Yes, I would say we can extend to one, 2 questions. We still have participants, so.
Okay, let's do. If Pascal, if that's all right for you, if you have a few more minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. I will again start from the top. So, as a PM at Tutti, do you do some work yourself when it comes to UX, prototyping, conceptual differentiation, and how do you influence such? Okay, so this is an interesting one. So at Tutti, we have actually people working for UX. Like as a department, they are a team, and what we do as PMs, we actually collaborate with them. They have a tremendous experience in this. They have studied for that, so they definitely take the lead. However, we do collaborate closely because obviously it is what we're trying to do is solve a user problem. We are trying to find the root cause, and then by different means, obviously trying to find the best solution for that. But so I would say at Tutti, it is definitely in the main responsibility for this is at the UX research team. But I mean, you have to do it together. There's no way around it, and it's probably a super exciting part of the PM job as well. So I'd say don't shy away from it. And obviously, like I would suggest whenever your company is doing prototyping or testing or anything of this sort, like get involved, especially if it is about your product, understanding your user, understanding how people are working with your product currently. It's going to give you so much more insights and help you do your job even better. Okay, should we continue or?
There are two more questions.
Okay.
If you have a few more minutes, we can maybe quickly go through them. I think you already touched the first one with the last answer about hypotheses for validating the roadmap.
Yeah, exactly. They go in the same direction. So basically the things that we currently have on our roadmap are based on our user needs. That's what we are focused on currently. That is the main goal, and that is how we are validating it. So based together with the UX research, we're just figuring out, do we really know what the problem is that we're trying to solve? And then obviously the functionalities or the features that we would like to bring to solve that, are they the right ones? That is how we validate.
Yeah,
exactly. How do you classify your competitors? How do you do market research and analyze it? Get decision for your product. Okay, so this is different depending on which experience I would be talking about. So at Tutti, we definitely look at competitors that are direct competitors, such as, for example, Ricardo, but then also indirect competitors that we have. So I would say that those are how we classify it. And how do you do market research? That is, yeah, the whole spectrum, I would say. And it ties into the last question that we've had, like how does that influence your product decision? When we, for example, have a user problem that we're trying to solve, we will definitely check out how competitors are doing it, or also a browser, like for example, Airbnb is one of the apps that we're also looking at a lot when it comes to just main like navigation, etc. So I would say like having a look at how other people are doing it definitely gives us some inspiration, but in the end, we're always trying to figure out what's best for our users and validate that again by doing research and by testing it. We also do a lot of A/B testing, of course, when we actually have our functionality and see if this lives up to the expectation.
Really cool. Thank you very much, Pascal. I think we've covered a lot of ground. Super insightful.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for the questions.
Yeah, many questions came. I was afraid at first, but in the end, we took 5 minutes extra. So sorry about that. So I would like to wrap up. Thank you very much to both of you, Pascal and Flurin, for today's virtual panel. I'm sharing here again on the screen the discount code for the PMF in November in Zurich. It will happen. So far, it has not been canceled. So feel free to save the discount code. And yeah, see you all at the next event, probably online. If not, we'll let you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for joining.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.